Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 31, I think it is, of Fracking Nightmare. Well, the last 8 months has gone so fast, but there is still so much happening. And the level of awareness in the UK of this nightmare that is rapidly approaching is increasing at a phenomenal rate of knots. This time last year, there were single figures of anti-fracking groups around the country. Now I'm told we're pushing over 200. It's increasing exponentially, much to the chagrin of the industry and the agents of the state who are desperately trying to shut down the opposition, more of which later. But at last, the alternative media really is picking up on this issue. As far as I'm aware, Fracking Nightmare is the only weekly program put out by the alternative media which looks at this issue and tries to keep up to date with things that are occurring primarily in the UK, but also obviously anything significant elsewhere in the world. So we have a massive task ahead of us. As you will see later in the program this evening, the opposition are developing subterfuge tactics in their quest to control the alternative community and more in particular, the anti-fracking community. Now, on Friday of last week, Louise, who regular viewers of Fracking Nightmare and certainly the anti-fracking community will know very well. Louise is a resident of Blackpool on the Fylde Peninsula and got interested in this issue after the seismic events of 2011, which were caused by Quadrilla damaging and then continuing to frack their well at Priest Hall. Now, Louise has been a tireless campaigner in raising awareness. She is a major contributor to the rapid rise of the number of anti-fracking groups that have become established on the Fylde Peninsula, thus ensuring that Quadrilla gets an appropriate headache. Of course, let's not forget that Quadrilla is chaired by none other than Lord John Brown, the government minister. He is seconded to the cabinet. He has a special responsibility for business ethos, which is absolutely a joke, considering his background, one of which where his mantra was profit above all else including human life. Well, Louise had the opportunity to meet with Max Keiser on Friday on his Russia Today show. And of course, Russia Today is a remarkable medium. Of course, there's no question that Ofcom will be doing its level best to try to shut down any alternative medium that specializes in addressing the truth. And who would have ever believed 30 years ago that we would have to tune to a Russian TV station to actually get access to the truth? Now, Max Keiser is well renowned for his interview style, but I think you're going to agree that Louise handled Max absolutely beautifully. So well done, Tina, but I want you to see that for yourself. So enjoy this 15 minutes of Louise in the company of Max Keiser on Friday's edition of Russia Today, The Keiser Report.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to anti-fracking activist Tina Rothery, a.k.a. Louise. Tina, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you on. Now, tell us first how you learned about fracking and why you are against fracking.
I live in Blackpool, so it's where the only incident of fracking has actually taken place in this country, and that happened in 2011. It caused 2 minor earth tremors, but yet Quadrilla decided that they would keep on drilling and pushing that fracking fluid into the fault for a full 6 weeks afterwards until it was suspended because they thought it might have something to do with the earthquakes. They still never actually publicly said we did that. but it's accepted that that was the cause of the earthquakes. In the meantime, we were all getting literature through our doors that was saying things like, oh, this is brilliant, it's natural gas, it's going to bring down energy prices, it'll be good for us, it's going to bring jobs. And it just sounded very empty. There were empty promises of like, and providing there are gold standard regulations, provided this happens, and based on things that weren't necessarily foreseeable, they told us it was safe. So we looked into it, well, I looked into it, and I couldn't find anything I believed in the brochure. And so I went and found a group that got together, and there was a small pocket of resistance in Blackpool, 6 people in a small park, and that was called Residents Action on Filed Fracking. And that was one of the first 2 groups in the area. We're now 20 groups strong in our region and 180 groups strong in the country, and we grow by at least 1 to 2 groups every week.
So the earthquake risk, and we'll get to that in a second, is part of the fracking story. Of course, the economics of fracking are horrible.
Yep.
It takes more energy to frack than you get out of the ground. It takes more money to frack than you generate in economic activity on the other side. It's purely a white elephant. It's a boondoggle, just a gift to, I guess, Quadrilla and these other companies.
We don't get it, though. We don't understand that, because we look at it and we say, right, well, clearly, financially, this is not a great proposition. You know, it's not something that, I mean, Lord Brown, you know, head of Quadrilla, has already said, no, it won't bring down energy prices. And in the States, there are some companies that are starting up now where it'll cost them $120 or $150 to produce a dollar's worth.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What is the point? Why?
It creates enormous fees for Quadrilla and these other firms and the bankers, and they create bond offerings that they sell, and they get a lot of money up front. But the short-term, medium, and long-term economics don't work at all. They will add debt to the UK's economy, which is one of the most indebted economies in the world. It'll add substantial debt to the UK economy, and that's masked to the effect that they can keep interest rates at these low levels until such time as they can't, and then suddenly they'll realize that this has been an enormous boondoggle. But you mentioned the earthquake problem of the fracking, which I guess is the most immediate, visceral risk to fracking. When we look at a state like Texas and Oklahoma in the U.S., these are big pro-oil states in the U.K., but they're terrified. 22,000% increase in earthquakes with the fracking. And now even they want to get rid of it because this is obviously, on a geological basis, suicide.
I think there's only so far you can go with saying, well, financially this is great, so these people will do it. And there's this, and I spoke to John Ashton, who's an ex-climate change diplomat, and he said it's implied inevitability that they rely on, which is, I keep hearing people say, well, it's just going to happen anyway, there's nothing you could do to stop it, which strikes me as a rather spineless thing to do in a democracy, where in theory we should have the ability to say, hey, come on, let's see reason and sense. This is like predicting manslaughter in the future, because it's what they'll leave behind. And also we know Quadrilla Resources, for instance, aside from being run by Lord Brown, who is ex-BP and ex-Department of Energy and Climate Change, and was key in making appointments to the DEC. You know, the DEC said earlier this year...
The DEC is...
Department of Energy and Climate Change. And the DEC earlier this year said that there would be 16,000 to 32,000 jobs in this industry. And yet when the Prime Minister spoke, he said 74,000 jobs. And he got that figure from the Centrica group. So why is our Prime Minister now being the mouthpiece, the Centrica?
It's not about jobs, because if it was about jobs, they would just reopen the coal fields. And that would be a way to increase jobs. It's equally ecologically horrific, and it's also economically unsustainable. But if they wanted jobs, they don't have to give them to Quadrilla. They could actually give them to people in the north, and they wouldn't have the earthquake risk.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not about jobs. So clearly, the Prime Minister is lying through his teeth, as he often does. But let's talk about another alternative to this energy situation here. We've talked about that fracking makes no sense economically. Meanwhile, in the UK, there's the Trillion Fund. They've crowdfunded £5 million worth of wind projects and solar projects, where people are putting up small amounts of cash, and they get an income, 6% on their money, on a wind project or a solar project. So here you have a fracking, like negative interest rates. It takes money out of the economy and destroys the ecology. Or you could put money into a wind or solar project where people get 5 or 6% on their money. So
Yeah.
why is Westminster? Are they just? Why are they?
But I think one of the problems with that is it's like we constantly see wind farm applications being turned down because they're an eyesore. I was in a cab earlier and the guy's like, yeah, but they're such an eyesore. I'm like, an eyesore? Because there's a wind farm in your line of vision, that's very distressing. But why is it less distressing that there's a shale gas rig burning methane on venting methane and they've got like those pipes? We're going to look like Texas in Lancashire for a start. I mean, they want 800 wells where we are.
But I don't understand the mentality of the British person. They want, like Spain, they're bringing in negative interest rates. Like Cyprus, they just take money out of your account. And they'll do that in the UK. HSBC, Barclays, and Royal Bank of Scotland already have this on the drawing board. They're going to charge you to keep money in the bank.
It sounds like we
you
live
can
in
have that, or you can have a solar project or a wind project where you get a check for 5 to 6% a year. So the average British person is saying, no, I don't want the income, mate. I want the government to steal my money. I mean, I know this is a nation of pedophiles, but this has gone too far. Does it extend to everyone's day-to-day existence? They don't feel comfortable unless they're getting raped by this government? Is that the bottom line?
It certainly feels that way, yes. I think that one of the biggest problems we have is a media problem, because it's all well and good saying about the Trillion Fund. I bumped into that by going on Twitter, and then I met the chap, and I thought it was a brilliant idea and a brilliant project. And the same with Solar Century. They're doing some great work. However, we don't, as the average British public, don't get to hear about that. We get the BBC and ITV and everyone else just cramming down our throats that shale gas is going to be good for us. It's a bridging thing. It's a stepping stone to a renewable future. And without discussing the renewable future, they've just revised the figures in the States. I think I can't remember the name of the study. It was a study done earlier this year, and it says that there's about 26 years worth of shale gas in America. 26 years, what was the point? You might as well assume the cupboard is already bare and prepare for that. You know, I mean, it just makes sound sense as, you know, basic housekeeping that you would say, have we got enough energy? No, it's going to run out in 26 years. Let's start planning ahead for that.
Well, that 26 years is overstated. The average project is only a few years. Of the dozens and dozens of fracking projects, less than 5% are actually generating any meaningful returns at all, and those are very short-lived.
And they have to keep downsizing what their estimates are. They did that with the South Downs here. They came up with this huge estimate. And they mess with the figures and the way they word it, too. It's all about word games. They'll say there's X trillions of cubic litres underneath the ground, and then they'll say, but the recoverable amount is somewhere between 1 and 7%.
In California, they said that they had this enormous fracked oil project, and they recently revised what they realized they were able to yield from this project down by 96%.
Yeah.
So, in other words, it was a hoax.
You see, for us in the anti-fracking movement, the way we've tackled it, first of all, we tried to appeal to the wisdom of our government. We tried to appeal to our democracy to listen to us. And in the end, we discovered that setting up a protection camp, slowing trucks down, made more sense than anything else, because then you'd read in the investor press, UK public shale gas opposition deters investors. Because if we can't hit our government where we need to, and no one's listening to us, then at least we can do is deter the investors or make them realise that for every day's drilling, we're going to delay every one of those trucks. We're going to be under the drills. We're going to do everything we can to prevent those pads being built. Have you heard what's happened in Lancashire this week? It's astounding. There's they have 2 planning applications in, and it's for Rosica and for Preston New Road, and it's for a full-on fracking site, not exploratory. They've now taken a Section 6 and squatted the field. That's not us. It's not the activists. And a Section 6 law is a law that squatters use to hold a space. And a security firm working on behalf of Quadrilla has taken the field where the pad will go and put in a Section 6, and there are 3 tents and 3 burly security guards holding it. That's what we do. But they've taken the field. I mean, how drastic is it? So now investors in Centrica and Quadrilla and Riverstone Holdings have shares in a squat in a field in Lancashire.
Right, and let's be clear. The economics are horrible. This will not create energy security. Price of energy will go up, not down, because all the money printed to subsidize this business is going to end up forcing prices for food and everything else up higher. Let's talk about the media for a second. You mentioned the media, the BBC. They have this impartiality rule, which means that in the case of fracking, if it's 100% understood to be a ridiculously overpriced boondoggle, and not one person of any credible nature can debate this, they are still forced to bring in any clown from the street. They'll bring in a monkey and dress him up as an executive as being the other side of the debate.
Yes.
Why can't they just say that there is no other side of this debate? It's a boondoggle. We're the BBC. It's the British Broadcasting Corporation, not the Quadrilla Broadcasting Corporation.
It might as well be.
Why can't they be honest about it? Why do they have to lie?
But we see that too. We said this should never have been. Everyone talks about the great fracking debate. It was never a debate. To us, it was a bad idea that landed on the table and should have been pushed off straight away. We don't want to debate it. We want it removed from the list of choices.
Because there is no debate, because it doesn't make any ecological sense or economic sense. It only makes sense if you're an executive of Quadrilla and you're getting this huge fee to put forward this boondoggle.
But you know what? I think a couple of things that are on our side, and we feel like we're actually making huge progress. Because what we did was little tiny public meetings all over the country. And we didn't even make them scary. We just said, this is the process of shale gas extraction. Can you see any problems with that? You turn around and the whole room's jaws were down. You know, this is such an obviously dangerous thing. And it's an obviously dangerous thing, not just in the immediate future, but in what they leave behind. And we know that with Quadrilla Resources, for instance, there are also Boland Resources and Bolcom Resources. They have all these other little companies with hardly any money. And those companies are the ones that are going to operate that drill site. And then they've got to go away. And then what happens in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Is someone coming back to check the integrity of what they left behind? Who's going to pop back in 10 years?
Bankruptcy.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
pattern in the U.S. is once they've raped the country and destroyed it, they declare bankruptcy and walk away. So these firms, after they destroy the UK countryside, I mean, where's Monty Don going to go to do his gardening shows? You know, Monty Don is the nation's top gardener.
He is indeed.
He's going to be in a dirt yard being fracked to death, you know, talking about getting fracked up the schwing, and that's not going to be much of a show for Monty Don, isn't it? You think, I thought Britain was a nation of gardeners with all the roses and the strawberries. I mean, all that stuff's going to be fracked to death.
We stopped being gardeners and we stopped being shopkeepers and we became City of London. That's what we became.
Financialized, you know, pimps and for Barclays and HSBC. It's disgusting.
And they dumped 2 million gallons of radioactive toxic waste from the fracking site into the Manchester Ship Canal before they changed the law and said, actually, no, we shouldn't do that.
All right, so how do people get in touch with you if they want to help stop this boondoggle?
Come to our website for the Lancashire one, which is stopfiledfracking.org.uk. We highly recommend another site, which is frackoff.org. That's frack-off.org for all the best resources, research documents.
That's easy to remember, frackoff.org.
That is quite easy. And then also the Talk Fracking tour that Vivienne Westwood just organised, that we went on a 5-city tour. That was fantastic. She does amazing work. And she said one of the lines that I think was the most important was when she said, you know, they talk about energy security. How secure do you feel? Do you think this company is here to make sure that energy gets sold to you as a British person? Because it's not. It'll go on to a European market. It's not ours. We didn't grow it. We didn't harvest it. And it's not going to be given to us as a gift.
All right, Tina, we got to go. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the
So where are the gas wells? Number 1, Tara Township. Here's the town of Tara. Let's zoom out and find a common radius measurement. So we're looking at about 18 kilometres, so that'd put 6 gas wells within 18 kilometres. So number 2, Chinchilla Township. So here's the township of Chinchilla. We zoom out, we get our 18 kilometres again, which gives us about 10 gas wells within the 18 kilometre radius. Now number 3, Dalby Township. Okay, so the Dalby Township, let's zoom out, get to our measurement tool, and for Dalby we end up with 1 gas well within a 19 kilometre radius. Number 4, the unlucky ones in the gas fields. This is QGC BG Group's Kenya Gas Fields processing plant on the edge of several residential estates and farms. The evaporation ponds alone cover almost 5.5 kilometres. So let's put it in perspective. Let's zoom out from the town of Chinchilla and make a comparison. The entire width from town end to end is 3.21 kilometres. The length is about 3.29 kilometres. The evaporation ponds would cover Chinchilla 1.5 times. Let's zoom out from one of QGC's gas fields. Yes, the dots are gas wells. Yes, the industry isn't even exporting yet. Go to our measurement tool and we have around a 22 kilometre radius. Now I'll give you an example of just how safe human beings will be throughout Australia with the unconventional gas industry. QGC's Kate Well cluster is in the heart of a residential estate. So Toowoomba, unconventional gas has its eyes seriously fixed on you and your surrounds. So no gas wells within a 32 kilometre radius, but if we go for a flight out to your west, you'll see the multinational giants aren't too far away. We pass Mount Irving, Mount Moriah, West Prairie, Cecil Plains, Grassdale, Cumberilla. Are you enjoying the flight? Bilby, Kogan, Williambilla. I can't see why people are whinging. This should be in everyone's backyard, shouldn't it? Here's QGC's tenements, Origin Energy's tenements. Oh, hang on, they're actually multinational corporations. Do you want this where you live? And ending with Miles. And how about a flyover from Cecil Plains to central Queensland? This is beautiful farming country. Unfortunately, those that are fixated on containment of the unconventional gas global giants are delusional. Prime agricultural land represents easier, more accessible drilling. It is not protected. As the government has indicated, it does not have the right to take a landholder's right to negotiate with a gas company away from them, even if they are on prime agricultural land. Zooming out and moving further north now, you can see we've really been asleep at the wheel. Zooming in, the blurred clusters turn into definable spots, each one potentially causing irreversible damage to the country. I just cannot stress enough that a majority of the unconventional gas wells are not yet in production. The true effects will become undeniable upon export. What's the scale of damage over Queensland so far? The gas industry is only in first gear in one state, covering over 1,000 kilometres long, over 300 kilometres wide. Some very credible projections put total potential unconventional gas well numbers in excess of 200,000 for Queensland alone. It is not the intent of this video to encourage a defeatist thought process. On the contrary, unconventional gas has been heavily wounded in the eyes of the public. Our window of opportunity still exists. Think national, not in my backyard. Stop the first export train, the Surat Basin to Gladstone's Curtis Island, and stop the unconventional gas industry in this country.
And welcome back to part 2 of episode 32 of Fracking Nightmare. I thought I'd lost one somewhere when I introduced the show. I think I said 31. Anyway, it is episode 32. Now, Tina Louise, I thought you did an amazing job there with Max. You covered a lot of ground. You actually managed to keep Max on track. And even when he threw the odd curveball, you managed to hit it straight back. Outstanding. Well, Tina Louise, of course, is a resident of Blackpool, and she says then her interest in this issue was sparked after the Fylde Peninsula was affected by at least 2 earthquakes, seismic events, 1.5 on the Richter and 2.3. Well, we have one well drilled and one well fracked in the UK, and that resulted in the seismic events there. But don't worry, because Michael Fallon says there's nothing to worry about, provided the robust regulatory controls are followed, which don't exist, then everything will be okay. Well, that's of course what people elsewhere in the world have been told. And one of the reasons I keep playing in the commercial breaks, although there's nothing commercial about it, is the animation produced by David Monk showing how southern Queensland has been literally fracked into oblivion in the space of just 5.5 years, destroying the livelihoods and the lives of many landowners in the area, including David and his father Brian's farm. Well, in Oklahoma, they are really getting hit by the earthquakes, and this is from CNN. Oklahoma tops California in earthquakes. Now, the Daily Mail actually is trying to present some kind of balanced media on this, but is it really? Because they're reporting on it, but only online. If you punch in fracking into the Daily Mail website, you will find a number of articles that they've posted online, but have never made it into print. Why is that? The Daily Mail actually ran an online article raising awareness of the list of the harmed. Could it be that there is some government blackout on negative articles appearing on fracking? When was the last time you saw an article in the British mainstream media about the negative impacts of fracking? I'm struggling to remember one. Well, this is from the Daily Mail website. It says, is fracking the reason why Oklahoma now has more earthquakes per year than California? Geologists descend on state to test if controversial drilling is to blame. It says, is fracking behind the exponential increase in earthquakes suffered across Oklahoma? That is the question the U.S. Geological Survey wants to know the answer to, because as of last month, Oklahoma surpassed California in the number of earthquakes experienced over the past 5 years. As of June 16, 2014, California, the home of the infamous San Andreas Fault, registered 140 earthquakes of 3.0 magnitude or greater, which is in stark contrast to Oklahoma's 207. The article continues, on Saturday and Sunday this very weekend, there were 7 earthquakes in Oklahoma. The largest one was a 4.3 tremor in Langston, north of Oklahoma City. No damage or injuries were reported. Well, there's not a lot of population north of Oklahoma City. If I remember, it goes up to the small town where the headquarters of the Freemasons are in Oklahoma. But that's about it. From 1978 to 2008, Oklahoma was struck with an average of 2 earthquakes of 3 magnitude or greater. In the time period June 2009 to June 19, 2014, there were 207 such earthquakes recorded in the state. The increase began 5 years ago when 20 quakes of 3.0 magnitude or higher occurred, followed by 43 the next year, and increasing every year except for 2012. This corresponds with the beginning of fracking in the state. Earthquakes are going to be a normal part of everyday life in Oklahoma. CNN meteorologist Chad Myers said they are going to become more and more a part of life there. I would say that's a fairly astute observation, Chad. But Oklahoma is actually exacerbating the problem because of the way in which used frac fluid is disposed of. The common process in the US has been evaporation pits, where the wastewater, the waste products, and the used frac fluids that are pumped out of the well are simply poured into a lined pit adjacent to the well and then allowed to evaporate into the atmosphere, which is one of the reasons why there is a phenomenon in the US known as downwinders. In other words, people who have the misfortune to live downwind of these evaporation pits, and guess what? They get very sick. Their livestock gets sick. And unfortunately, in many cases, people lose their livelihoods as a result. So Oklahoma, being an oil and gas state, was looking for alternatives to the evaporation pits, and somebody had the bright idea of using disused wells to pump the used frac fluid down. The problem with this is that the frac fluid is still live. It still does what it was designed to do, which is to be aggressive and create new permeability and porosity in the geology. So consequently, once it's pumped into the well, it's looking for a way to create new pathways. And of course, eventually it will find weaknesses in the geology or faults, although the faults are a lot less in Oklahoma than they are in the UK geology. So it is becoming literally a bit of a fracking nightmare for the residents of Oklahoma. Not only do they have to contend with the phenomena of tornadoes, because Oklahoma is serious tornado alley, but now they have to contend with the earthquakes. And the reality is they can't stop them because there's no possibility of pumping this used frac fluid out of the ground, because once it's put in there, it disappears goodness knows where. That's why it's considered to be a very successful frac job if 50% is recovered. Now, in the UK, of course, we are much more heavily faulted. And we are much more densely populated. And at the moment, there are no specific plans to dispose of wastewater, used frac fluid, etc., produced water into disused wells. But where is it going to disappear to? That's a very, very good question, because the quadrilla fluids were disposed of in Davyhulme in Greater Manchester, and as we now know, something between 800,000 and 2 million gallons of waste product were disposed of in the Manchester Ship Canal, and the solids are still contained in double skin tanks. And apparently Davyhulme Treatment Centre is sending the solids around to other treatment centres as they struggle to find a facility that's capable of dealing with these products. And as regular viewers of Fracking Nightmare will know, later this year, some 64% of the country will be licensed or potentially licensed. About 18% is licensed already. That's the brown areas in that map. And the rest of the green areas could potentially be licensed by the end of the year. I certainly hope that every single tract of land that is made available by the British government is indeed licensed, because that way it really will bring home to a significant chunk of the British population just how close it is to their backyard. And as we know, the reality is that when people look at this for themselves, they very, very quickly come to the realization that this isn't something that they want anywhere near them. Now, the company that is making moves to become the major player in unconventional hydrocarbons in the UK is the combination of these two companies, iGas and Dart Energy. iGas, of course, made a move on Dart Energy about a couple of months ago now, and the acquisition becomes, I think, finalised in around September. So rumour has it, although I might have started the rumour, that the new company is going to be called DiGas. So here we have a competition for regular viewers of Fracking Nightmare. What we would like to do, especially the artists amongst you, we would like you to come up with a logo for the new combined company of iGas and Dart Energy using the name DiGas, which I guess is very appropriate for the license that they have in South Wales. Or under current political correctness, is that a racist observation? I'm no longer sure. I no longer care. Anyway, DiGas. Yes, I met with the representatives of DiGas last week when they held their community drop-in meeting at Earlsmere Port. What we see on the screen here, all of these purple licenses, these are all iGas, and the yellow ones just happen to be Dart. So obviously it's the combined company. Well, iGas plan to be drilling an exploratory well into the coal bed, coal seams here to look at the viability of extracting coal bed methane. And so I went along to the meeting at the Holiday Inn last Thursday evening. And much to my shock, horror, and absolute surprise, I was allowed in. And I have to say, it was very entertaining indeed, because it is really remarkable to see an increasing percentage of the population who have educated themselves, and to see them run absolute rings around the DiGas representatives, some of whom are simply PR personnel, and unfortunately their knowledge is seriously lacking. And so we are collating some of the responses that people received, and we will, in a future program, make some of these responses public. And you will be able to see for yourself just what a cowboy operation iGas, DiGas really is. DiGas, unfortunately, may be a very appropriate name for these cowboys and girls. Well, I picked up one of their brochures. This is the very smart-looking brochure. I have to say that the literature produced by iGas is somewhat more professional than that produced by Quadrilla, and this is available to all the local residents who drop by. Unfortunately, it's still a relatively small number, but nonetheless, it's a well-informed small number. And one of the things that is very significant in these brochures and on their wall charts is their bragging about their contributions to the local community. Well, you know, what price is there really on your local community being put at risk by an industry that has a track record that is 1 well drilled, 1 well fracked, and 2 earthquakes? Well, a lot more earthquakes than that, but 2 that were significant. And they didn't even acknowledge it, even though they knew they'd done it. So here we have in this brochure, the iGas Energy Community Fund was set up in 2008 and is committed to distributing several hundred thousands of pounds a year to gullible communities who are prepared. I made that bit up, funnily enough. It says iGas recognises that it has the potential to affect its neighbours, and it accepts that responsibility to try to minimise those impacts and to operate in a socially acceptable manner. Now, you will note that what they are not saying here is that their industry is totally risk-free, and they absolutely guarantee that there will be no negative impacts whatsoever. They say it just accepts responsibility to try to minimise those impacts and operate in a socially acceptable manner, which would appear to be throwing money at the local community. We know that a good corporate neighbour is one who contributes to the wider well-being of the community, and the community was set up to support this arm. So far, the fund has supported 27 projects in towns and villages close to our sites in the North West, East Midlands and the south of England. And then it talks about primary schools in Cadishead, contribution to the Parks Group. The bottom line is that this is corporate bribery. If I offer you a glass of water and I simply ask you how much it's going to take to get you to drink that glass of water, which unfortunately has a 15% solution of hydrochloric acid in, what would your answer be? I doubt very much whether there's any amount of money that will make you drink that, yet iGas seem to think they can bribe local communities with a few £1,000s. It says here under Earlham and Cadishead, through the donation, a £15,000 iGas donation is supporting a project to complete a footpath which runs along 3/4 of the circumference of the old river within Prince's Park. Well, meanwhile, of course, they are looking to establish well sites right across the northwest of England in collusion with their landlords, Peel Holdings. And if people aren't careful, then what they're looking at is literally a new industrial nightmare right across the northwest of England. Now, Peel Holdings. It's also worth mentioning that we had a bit of a good news last week. We were due to be in court on Wednesday of this week in the Royal Courts of Appeal, following the attempt by Peel Holdings, who were working obviously on behalf of iGas, because Peel Holdings had no real reason to try to get an eviction of the community protection camp on the verge alongside Barton Moss Road. But under some pressure from iGas, Peel took the community to court. Although they did indeed get a ruling in their favour in the civil courts in Manchester, the Royal Courts of Appeal upheld that there was indeed a grounds for appeal, and the appeal hearing was scheduled to take place on Wednesday, July 16th. Well, obviously, the camp is no longer on Barton Moss, and as was promised in the court and to the local community, once iGas left the northwest, or left Barton Moss, then the camp left Barton Moss Road, and it left the verge in a better condition than when it arrived. So really, what was the point of the appeal case? Yet the appeal lawyers seemed not to really be in any rush to contact our lawyers. So we took the initiative and simply suggested that it might be appropriate, considering there was nobody on the moss, that the case be dropped. But we also asked that the costs that had been levied against the protection community were dropped. And I'm pleased to report that just as I pulled into the parking lot of the Holiday Inn in Ellesmere Port to attend the iGas meeting there, I got the phone call from Lee Day, from our lawyers, stating that they had had a letter from the Peel solicitors and they had indeed agreed to drop the case. Now, this was the same day that Humberside Police, or the Crown Prosecution Service to be more accurate, dropped the charges against John and Val Maguire, who were the couple that were arrested when Rathlin tried to get onto the site at Crawberry Hill some nearly 3 months ago. So this is good news all round, because the charges are indeed being dropped left, right and centre. Well, the wonderful news is that the level of awareness is ramping up, and in fact tonight there was a protest gathering, for want of a better word, outside Wallesley Town Hall. Here we see the people earlier this evening to let the local authority know that the community was getting itself well informed on this issue and expected the council to do the right thing and represent the local community and reject any planning application submitted by the motherfrackers. So I've been pretty busy and will remain busy as we try and get around and keep the motherfrackers on their toes and keep doing whatever it is we can to raise awareness. So tomorrow evening I have been invited to be in the audience of a debate at in Fernhurst. Now, this is a debate that's actually going out live, and it's going to be in Fernhurst, which is a site that's being targeted, I believe, by Celtic. And unfortunately, this is where we pay the price for the regionalisation of news. And of course, the regionalisation of news is a very carefully calculated strategy. The British government has learned from the US, where you compartmentalise the news so that people who live in the area think that it's getting national awareness, when in reality it's only getting it out into the immediate surrounds. So this is tomorrow night. So if you live in the southeast, this is going out on BBC. You'll need to check your own schedules in the area to find out what time it's going out. But I understand that Michael Fallon is going to contribute. Somehow I doubt that Michael Fallon will be there in person. He will be there via probably studio hookup. And no doubt you will hear Michael Fallon use the phrase robust regulatory control once or twice if he does make a contribution. So I know there's going to be a number of people in the audience who are seriously concerned about the presence of the motherfrackers in Sussex, so it should be for a lively evening. I'm looking forward to sitting back and enjoying the debate. Then the following day, if I can find the right slide here. There we go. The following day, I should be in Doncaster and back with the old adversary, iGas. Now, I know that the South Yorks anti-fracking community will be there in attendance, and hopefully some people from Nottinghamshire, and also some people from North Yorkshire and the East Riding. So it should be a good turnout. And they're breaking with their usual venues, and it's in the Mayflower the Mayflower Pub. Let me get the right teeth in. On the High Street in Austerfield, Doncaster, DN10 6QU. So if you want to find out what iGas are planning in South Yorkshire, then do get along to that event tomorrow. And if you want to see a bit of entertainment, then do come along, and let's see if the iGas representatives have learned anything from the training that I would seriously hope they've been put through in the past week. There's a few other meetings planned. Here we are, North Yorkshire at this beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And there's a couple of meetings being organised there. One on the 16th, so that would be Wednesday. That's at Terrington Village Hall. and then one on the 17th at Hovingham Village Hall. So if you're in the North Yorks area and you want to see what the Mother Frackers have got planned for you, then do head along to one of those meetings. Now, back to East Yorks, where of course I have my second home. Well, in fact, right now it's my only home. My caravan, where I'm spending about 4 to 5 nights a week. Unfortunately, I'm still averaging about 900 miles a week. I've averaged that since February of last year as we try and raise awareness around the country. And the good news is there are more and more people doing the same. We're all reaching out to different audiences. And as I've said many, many times before, this is an issue that is bringing people together from right across the social and the political and the philosophical spectrum. Disparate groups all coming together to focus on this issue, because people are realizing this is not only something you don't want in your own backyard, you don't want it in anybody's backyard in this country. So, by the way, let me acknowledge the support of those people who have donated to the Fracking Awareness Campaign, because I certainly could not be doing what I'm doing without your support. I sail very, very close to the wind. Sometimes I wonder where the next tank of diesel is coming from, but it always seems to manifest just in time. And we still have some 270 odd days before the next election, so we've got to seriously make sure that we maximize the opportunity that those days afford. This is not just my job right now, it's my life. We are going to stop this industry. As I have made it very clear, I have no issue with conventional hydrocarbons, but I do have an issue with unconventional extraction techniques, because as is proven everywhere in the world, we do not have a safe technology to extract unconventional hydrocarbons. Well, in the East Riding, as regular viewers of this program will be aware, the Humberside Police are effectively rewriting the law in more ways than one. This is, if I can get the right slide up. This is Justine Curran. She is the Chief Constable of Humberside, and somehow I doubt that Justine Curran is actually setting the policy for policing at the Rathlin locations in Humberside. Somehow I suspect that Justine Curran is getting her direction from much higher up the proverbial food chain. So we have seen at West Newton in particular, and earlier at Crawberry Hill, that the police are not prepared to recognise the campaigners as peaceful protesters. They are refusing to acknowledge the presence of the Human Rights Act in UK legislation, and are resorting to recognising or trying to recognise or label the protection community as pickets. Well, Justine Curran would appear to be no stranger to rewriting the legislation, because last week she made a call and appealed to Humberside head teachers to permit the children of police officers to take term time holidays. So clearly it's one rule for everybody else and one rule for Justine Curran. So this really should come as no surprise to us, because that's exactly what we're seeing in terms of the Humberside police interpretation of peaceful protest. Well, I spoke to a Humberside head teacher today who spoke to me on the promise that he would, he, might have been a she, remains anonymous. And basically what he said was she's just made it worse for the children of serving police officers, because obviously if they did make an exception, that would set an unfortunate precedent. So now they are going to absolutely ensure that if any Humberside police officers try to take their children out of school during term time, then they will bring the full force of whatever action can be taken against them. So, it's quid pro quo, I guess. Well, we are going to have to test the resolve of this legislation. How robust is this human rights legislation in the UK? On Friday, 3 members of the protection community were arrested at West Newton less than 20 seconds after stepping in front of the trucks. Now, I implore people watching to go and check out the Crown Prosecution Service's own guidelines for arresting people at peaceful protest. Now, we have been told previously that the police do not follow the guidelines of the Crown Prosecution Service. They follow the guidelines of ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers. ACPO is a private company. So who is setting the law in this country? Is it, well, we know it's not the Parliament, it's the EU, but let's pretend that the the people sitting in Westminster are actually capable of introducing legislation into this country. We have on the statute books the Human Rights Act of 1998, which came into law in 2000. This is the UK iteration of the European Directive on Human Rights. Articles 10 and 11 fundamentally preserve the freedom to peaceful protest. And yet ACPO, a private company, chooses to ride roughshod over this. Fortunately, the Crown Prosecution Service and the judiciary are generally upholding the values of law, which of course is more than can be said for the police. So we have to push this issue. We have to ensure, one way or another, that Humberside police are called to account over this blatant disregard for UK law and blatant disregard for the fundamental right to peaceful protest. Now, I should be back in East Yorkshire after the iGas meeting in Doncaster, and I hope that we can encourage many more people to come join us, particularly as the school holidays are now coming about. These are great locations for families. The camps are family friendly, so do come along. And we hope that you don't get arrested. There's no need to get arrested. You know, there are people who are prepared to put their necks on the line, but it's a lot easier to do that when they know that they have support, especially when they know they have support from the local community. You know, as I've said earlier this evening in Humanity versus Insanity, we are under attack on so many levels. You know, if we wanted to poison a nation's water supply, I can't actually think of a faster way to do it than unleash these motherfrackers on the UK geology. Within a generation, our water won't be drinkable. There are some upcoming events as well that hopefully in other areas will help to raise awareness and encourage people to educate themselves. This is Gathering on the Green. This is, I think, becoming quite a regular event now. This is at the Lytham Green, right at the windmill. And it's Frack Free Filed and Mothers Against Fracking. By the way, Justine Curran is a mother. So, Justine, I implore you to look at what it is that you are effectively acting as the corporate enforcers for. Because ultimately, when this goes sour, and it will at some juncture, then you will be culpable. And what will you tell your child? Well, another event in the Hull area on Sunday 27th. This is Hull Heard. This is a combined music, comedy and speaking event, and some magician there. And this is, I have no idea where this is. I'm sure that if you go to the appropriate Facebook page, go to Hull and East York's Frack Off or Frack Free Hull and Holderness, you'll find all the details for this event. I'll mention it again next week when I'll have the specifics about the location. But put it in your diary if you're in the East Yorks area, Sunday 27th of July. Well, there's also, by the way, I should mention that very important for the people of the file to come along to this meeting, because Quadrilla have got planning permission for 2 further wells at Rosica and on the Preston Road. Those sites have already been occupied by the security company to prevent the protection community from moving on. They've occupied the land under Section 6, which is very interesting because it's my understanding that when you take possession of land or a property under Section 6, you cannot use it for commercial purposes, and I'm pretty certain that the security companies that have taken the land are indeed doing so commercially. But it's very important that the people of the Fylde go along to this event and meet like-minded people, look at what's going on in your community, and if there isn't an anti-fracking community in your village, then perhaps you need to start one. Well, I'm almost out of breath. Those of you who saw Humanity versus Insanity tonight, in case you hadn't realised, I am seriously pissed off. We have a major challenge on our hands, and we have far more people than the opposition. They may have all the money, they may have all the toys, but we have love, we have compassion, and we have the will to bring about the changes that we know we need to see. So it's all to play for. I know that we will win this. I know we've got a lot of drama and a lot of trauma to go through. I know we're going to have to deal with some extremely difficult situations. Already, the industry and the government are using some very, very dubious tactics in which to try to suppress the opposition and also try to reduce the speed at which the people of this country are waking up to this nightmare. I'm going to be in East Yorks. I'm going to be at the Doncaster meeting on Wednesday. I should be in East Yorks. And next week's episodes of Humanity versus Insanity and Fracking Nightmare will be coming from East Yorkshire. Thank you for joining me tonight. Hope to meet up with you soon. Take care now.